These deleted One Punch Man chapters changed the series forever, and it all starts with chapter 98, titled Tears of Regret. Now, the numbering of these chapters is going to vary for you depending on where you read it, but the title is going to be Tears of Regret nonetheless. This is the chapter during the Monster Association arc where the battle between Child Emperor and Phoenix Man really starts to take off. Initially, we had gotten a version of this fight where we see a bunch of crazy stuff happen back to back to back, a bunch of different forms from Phoenix Man, and of course some awesome transformations in a way for Child Emperor as well, as we saw the unveiling of his ultimate weapon, Brave Giant. But series artist Yusuke Murata decided to do something very different with this arc, something that he really hadn't done much before to that point. If you've been a fan of the manga for any amount of time, you know that Yusuke Murata tends to go back to a lot of chapters and completely redraw them for various reasons. Prior to this fight, it used to be just to pretty much improve the artwork of the chapters he had already drawn. Mostly stylistic changes, also things like improving the shading and the paneling. For example, prior to this chapter in chapter 97, Yusuke Murata had redrawn that chapter as well, but again, there wasn't any major changes. He might have given some better angles to certain panels, and also shown some intermediate motion instead of cutting from one scene to the next. Like for example, when his cybernetic dogs merged into the Cerberus dog, we saw a portion of the transformation before the machine was fully formed. And prior to chapter 98, that's what these redraws tended to be, just improvements of the art. Well, beginning with Tears of Regret, we start to see some major stylistic changes, some that actually foreshadowed some massive changes to come, ones that would actually influence the story itself and would completely change it going forward. The first of these notable changes was how Child Emperor looked inside of his Brave Giant robot. Once it was summoned and formed around him, he was nested inside of it like some kind of Gundam. The layout of how Child Emperor looks within this robot isn't super different, but there are some notable changes. Like, he doesn't have that thing that looks like a scouter from Dragon Ball covering his eye, and he doesn't have these like digital screens directly in front of his face. Again, not major changes, but something worth noting. But first, I want to tell you guys about this exciting new game called Fist Out. Fist Out is a groundbreaking competitive card game that perfectly blends the thrill of battle with strategy, and does so with visually unique gameplay and characters. Players here act as lords who lead their card minions into intense and exciting strategic duels. Players can not only enjoy fun card collection and development, but also study and share various gameplay combinations to tackle different PvE dungeons and PvP competitions. You can select a hero, assemble a deck of subordinate cards, and with 7 races and nearly 300 cards featuring unique effects to choose from to build your 30 card deck, the strategic possibilities are literally endless. You can mix angels and demons in the same deck, or pair mythological figures like Aladdin with adorable cows, and on top of that, you can step into the arena to compete against other lords, team up with them to battle world bosses, or conquer dungeons to earn big rewards. Features like the guild system, friend battles, and cross-server rankings provide multiple ways for you to compete and play with others. Right now is the perfect time to download the game and get started, because they're gearing up to launch some exciting new tournaments with massive cash prizes that are going to be up for grabs. Do not miss your chance to prove your skills and make your mark in the community with an exclusive starter gift pack worth $20. And you can get this by using my link in the description only to download the game today, and I'll see you guys in there. So yeah, click that link, but for now, back to the video. But after this, the redraws start to get actually kind of confusing, because there's 2 versions of this fight before the final version is introduced. Now, in the final version of the fight between Child Emperor and Phoenix Man is when we actually get the introduction of the Phoenix Space. This is some kind of metaphysical, like psychic plane where Phoenix Man is able to take other, quote, costume monsters. And technically in this case within the fight, this would also include Child Emperor because he was inside a Brave Giant, in a sense wearing a costume. Now, I think this little stipulation was introduced to like not make this power completely overpowered, because it was essentially giving Phoenix Man his own domain expansion to use whenever he wanted. Prior to this final version of the fight, we just mainly saw some rearranging of scenes and also some improvement to the artwork as well. Sure, you could argue that the addition of the Phoenix Space in this latest version makes Phoenix Man much more powerful than his previous versions that didn't have it. What I will say to counteract that is that Phoenix Man was heavily nerfed in this previous version compared to this final one. And that's because because one of the major changes of this entire fight that Murata for some reason decided to completely delete from the series is the existence of Phoenix Man's Brilliant Eagle form. Now, the reason this Brilliant Eagle form might have been removed is because it honestly made Phoenix Man completely broken. This form allowed him to absorb any type of energy that was thrown at him, and then he'd be able to use this energy for himself, to enhance his power and do crazy things like be able to bring back the dead. Using his own life energy, he was able to literally reanimate corpses and create his own zombie army to attack Brave Giant. Sure, he didn't have the Phoenix space in this version, but honestly he didn't really need it because he just pretty much became this infinite power cell where any amount of energy that was thrown at him, he could then use to power himself up and create these crazy new abilities. Sure, in the newer versions, he still got to keep his Falcon mode, his Hawk mode, and even got this new Penguin mode where he was able to drop like massive icebergs, but none of them lived up to Brilliant Eagle's potential. But again, I understand why it was nerfed in the first place because it would kind of put the fight in a narrative hole. Like, how is Child Emperor supposed to defeat Phoenix Man at this point when his Brave Giant robot is on the brink of collapse? Also, Child Emperor received a nerf himself because it seemed that the final version of this fight completely removed Brave Giant's ultimate move, which was the Millennium Emperor Nova. This was a massive blast we saw that Brave Giant threw at Phoenix Man that was so powerful that it shot completely through the Monster Association hidden base underground and made its way to the surface, destroying several buildings. This beam was no joke, and again it highlighted just how broken Phoenix Man had become because this still didn't kill him. He ended up returning with this corrupted form from absorbing too much energy at once. But of course, if there's no Brilliant Eagle form in the final version of this fight, then there really isn't any reason to have the Millennium Emperor Nova either. They likely removed this ultimate move to save it for a later arc. At least that's my guess. For me personally though, I think the original version of this fight, or specifically the second version, where it's mainly improvements to the art and the sequencing, I think that was probably the best version to leave, because the final version kind of compressed the fight a little too much in my opinion, and I absolutely loved Phoenix Man's Brilliant Eagle form. One thing I will say though that was a nice addition to this entire fight was the introduction of Saitama. Originally Saitama had nothing to do with this fight, he wasn't really involved in it in any capacity, but of course any situation that gets Saitama involved is always a great time. Like for example, one of the times that Phoenix Man takes Child Emperor into the Phoenix space, Saitama just like straight up somehow punches a hole into it just to kind of intervene. He like casually just bends reality in order to interject into the conversation. And the last major change to this fight is how Phoenix Man is defeated, because in the original version, Phoenix Man is infested with these like tickle bots from Child Emperor, and the ticklish feeling is so unbearable that Phoenix Man starts to straight up rip off his own costume. Then Child Emperor comes in to finish things off and completely rips off the costume, which removes all of Phoenix Man's powers. But in the final version of this fight, Phoenix Man actually explodes from these tickle bots and reverts to this Chick Man form. So he's still technically within the costume and probably can utilize some of its powers, but he's likely not nearly as strong as he was during the fight. Had Murata in 1 stuck with the original version of Phoenix Man, which was also notably a much darker and sinister character, while also keeping his Brilliant Eagle form, this fight looked like it originally would have ended with Phoenix Man being defeated and probably never seen again without any relevance to the story going forward. But it seems that One and Murata wanted something different for this character, seeing as how he's now a crossing guard for school kids and we got to see him in future chapters after the Monster Association arc. So I guess in a sense, as a Phoenix Man fan myself, this third and final version of this fight allowing him to continue in the story and be a relevant character, I guess is something that I can appreciate in the end. However, this next deleted chapter was something that was definitely not appreciated by a lot of One Punch Man fans at the time. This next deleted chapter is something that had a portion of the fan base like super pissed, having some people even write off the manga completely. And this is of course chapter 164, The Abominable Fist That Turned Against God. Now this is a chapter that many people don't even know was completely changed. People that weren't reading each chapter as it came out and maybe just read the manga in chunks, like there is a good portion of the fan base that does this. So there is a lot of people out there that doesn't even know that this deleted chapter exists. And honestly, the change that was made to this chapter sees like one of the biggest pivots in the entire series. It quite literally changes everything that happens in the series from then on. The crazy thing is that the majority of this chapter is actually very similar to the final version that we now see in the manga. It's the continuing buildup of the massive fight that goes on between Saitama and Garou. And to this point, Garou is so strong that one strike that he delivers to Saitama where he plants him into the earth has enough force behind it that it starts to literally bulge the other side of the planet. Like he straight up caves in an entire volcano, and the force of this attack goes through the core of the entire earth and pops out the other side of it. But of course, this still isn't enough to defeat Saitama, making Garou truly understand how hopeless this fight really is for him. But as Garou starts to realize how unbeatable Saitama really is, this is where the major changes really begin. Because after Saitama delivers a blow that sends him flying and straight up splits through entire mountains, Garou is left gazing at Saitama knowing that this fight is fruitless. Now from this point on in the original chapter, Garou goes down a much more depressed route. He pretty much submits to Saitama and realizes that he's never going to beat him. In this moment, he decides that if his dreams were crushed by this hero, his dream of becoming the ultimate evil and this god-level threat, he at least wanted to go down as a monster. He wanted to be put down like the evil monster he always wanted to be by the hero that crushed his dreams. Saitama notices this desperation and actually stops him from attacking. This is when Saitama starts to really get interested what Garou's deal with heroes really is. Like what his trauma with them is. He sees that this guy's been somehow traumatized by heroes in the past and wants to figure out what's making him so angry. So instead of continuing the fight, Saitama actually insists that they talk it out. And this is when we get one of the most infamous scenes in the entire series. We cut to this panel of Saitama and Garou sitting within this broken down house, ready to have some kind of therapy session. Now I've said this in the past, but I think this original version of the series was honestly pretty good. I like the comical layout of the scene where Saitama looks like he's ready to listen, and Garou sitting across from him at the table is sitting all politely in his giant gargoyle form, just seemingly ready to spill his heart out to Saitama. But of course, like I said before, the reaction from a lot of fans was definitely not that of enjoyment. They did not appreciate the way this fight was going, and I could understand the reasoning behind it. To this point, the Monster Association had been building up for years to this moment. People were waiting for this final epic fight between Garou and Saitama, and they were eager to see what heights Garou would hit and how massive this fight would really become. They did not appreciate this little timeout that was seemingly happening, and some people even preemptively thought that this would be the end of the fight in general. Now, I don't think this was ever going to be the end of this fight. I'm pretty sure it was going to continue after this. But again, I can't understand why people were upset with, seeing this happen at the very end of this chapter after waiting so long for this fight to finally arrive. Personally, I think it would have been important to have this little narrative build-up in the middle of this fight with this therapy session before hitting the gas again and going to the very end of this fight. And especially now knowing how the final version of the manga turned out, I do really wish there was a moment like this where we kind of sat down and really got some time for Saitama to fully understand where Garou was coming from and what his motivations really were. And I don't know if it was the discourse from a portion of the fan base that made Murata change this chapter, or maybe he even had second thoughts about this therapy session himself. But whatever the case may be, this chapter was changed dramatically, completely removing this little therapy session, keeping the foot on the gas and not stopping until this fight was completely over. Because in this newest version, again, the majority of this chapter went almost exactly the same, but where things really started to change was in that same sequence where Garou gets straight up punched through a mountain and he's gazing upon this unbeatable hero. Garou doesn't submit to Saitama at this point. He doesn't give up. He actually starts to become even more enraged at the fact that he can't beat Saitama. He starts to see him as the embodiment of all the unfairness he's faced in his life. So although he charges at Saitama with a punch in the exact same way he did in the first version, this last effort was filled with a lot more rage than it was despair. So instead of stopping the punch, Saitama counteracted with a punch himself, one that would send him flying and bursting out of his monster shell. This is where Garou starts to have this inner monologue, where he says, "So even after I've made it this far, it figures. I get pulverized by this unbeatable fairness, and now it's all over?" This of course is the moment where God comes into the picture. This is where One Punch Man fans get the shock of a lifetime. God actually makes an appearance on Earth.
From the kingdom of heaven, please welcome God.
that only Garou can see. To everybody else, it just looks like a bunch of massive storms going on. But in this moment, God in the form of Bang offers some of his power to Garou. We don't exactly see what happens in their exchange until later, but whatever happens up there, Garou comes back more powerful than anyone we have seen in the entire series. Even like 50 chapters later, as we still continue the manga, I don't think we've ever seen anyone as powerful as this form of Garou. He comes back in his cosmic fear mode, able to literally bend the power of the cosmos to his whim. Now this final version of chapter 164 ends with Garou unveiling this cosmic fear form, which of course is a heavy contrast to the original version where he was still in his gargoyle form ready to spill his heart out to Saitama. And from here on out, of course, the rest is history. Garou and Saitama continue to have their massive fight, and it ends with Garou being defeated and escaping. But it does make you wonder, or at least it makes me wonder, where this original version would have gone. Like, what vision did One and Murata have for this fight originally? Was Cosmic Fear Mode even going to happen in this original version? Was the fight really going to end right there and then like a lot of people thought? These are questions we're probably never going to get official answers to, but I think most people were happy with the end result with this final version. I myself was also pretty satisfied, so I have nothing to complain about. One thing I do definitely have some complaints about though, and I'm not in the minority here. There has been a lot of discourse from fans with this latest major change that has come to the manga, and that's been with the seemingly endless redrawing and rewriting of this latest arc in the story. This of course being the Ninja Village arc. This arc has seen rewrites and redraws unlike anything we've seen in the series before. Even compared to the fight between Phoenix Man and Child Emperor, where the entire fight was redrawn and rewritten 3 different times, that does not compare to this. Because imagine that happening to an entire arc. And honestly, unlike the 2 prior changes that we just talked about, the fight between Child Emperor and Phoenix Man, and then the fight between Saitama and Garou, this one I honestly cannot see the reason for the changes. In my opinion, this end result, this final version, makes the story worse than it was in prior versions. It's been almost 2 years now since the first version of this arc started to come out. This arc of course heavily revolves around Flashy Flash and also Speed of Sound Sonic, because in this arc we find out that they pretty much grew up together when they were kids. They were both trained in the same ninja village that we soon found out was the home to the new villain of this arc, the ninja leader, also known as That Man, and would later be referred to as Empty Void. Now because of how long these changes took to make, always starting with the redoing of chapter 195, the number 195 seems to strike fear in a lot of fans, like it triggers some kind of PTSD. People have nightmares and massive fears that the next chapter that comes out, they might see the number 195 for like the 4th time, signaling yet another redraw of this arc. But either way, chapter 195 is titled That Man, and one of the major changes in this arc from version to version is how number 1 hero Blast is involved in it. Depending on the version that you read really depends on when Blast shows up and to what capacity he's relevant to the story. Like in the very first version of this arc, Saitama, Flashy Flash, and Monako meet him at the Hero Association base, where we see that he's involved with Sitch in conducting research to return people from monsters to humans, specifically people that consumed monster cells and became monsters. Now in the second version of this arc, we mainly just see some improved artwork, so the storyline does go very similar, and we don't start to really see changes until the introduction of Empty Void, because in the very first version of this arc, Flashy Flash gets a letter from Sonic telling him to meet him at this place where they're gonna have their final fight. So they start battling, and then they get interrupted by this other party of ninjas. They end up defeating them as well, and this is when the ninja leader, aka Empty Void, shows up and starts to give them some real trouble. In the first version, Empty Void is introduced by forming out of like the entrails of the fallen ninja. I for one thought this was a pretty cool introduction, something very morbid and shocking compared to what we're used to seeing with this manga. I thought it was a pretty cool addition. But with the second version, his introduction is much different. He interjects in a much more sinister and cunning way, by disguising himself as Flashy Flash and tricking Sonic into touching a God Cube. But in both of these versions, Blast shows up at around the same time, after they defeat the Heavenly Ninja Party, and just at the point where Empty Void is about to finish them off. Now the first version of this arc ended at that moment, with Blast showing up to face off against Empty Void, but the second version of this arc saw this fight continue. This new version of Empty Void seems to be more on par with Blast's power as opposed to the first version, where we see a pretty awesome exchange between the both of them. Empty Empty Void definitely gets a massive buff in this second version, because with this updated version, we also get the revelation that Empty Void was present when Cosmic Fear Garou was defeated, in the moment where all of Garou's power started to seep out of his face as a result of the massive punch that Saitama delivered. It was revealed that Empty Void had actually absorbed all of this power for himself, and this power kind of caused him to go into this Cosmic Fear mode himself. We see Empty Void like break out of this monster shell that he's in and get introduced to this celestial version that's very similar to Garou's Cosmic Fear form, and additionally with the absorption of Garou's power, it also somehow corrupted the grip that God had on Empty Void, which brings back some form of his humanity in his fight with Blast, and sends us into this flashback where we get to see how Empty Void first met Blast in the first place, how he was originally one of Blast's partners, and we even found out that Blast ended up marrying and having a kid with Empty Void's sister. So yeah, we get the introduction of Blast's wife. Her name's Luna, and she was also a ninja from the Ninja Village. Now this second version of the arc ends with the reveal of Empty Void's master plan. We find out that Empty Void's true goal was to eventually become powerful enough and build a big enough army of monster disciples that he would eventually take his own life and allow his disciples to consume his own power in order to become strong enough themselves to turn against God. Now this revealed face turn for Empty Void, trying to make him seem like he was actually a good guy all along, I always thought was pretty convoluted and honestly kind of dumb. Like sure, your end goal was to try and defeat God, but the way he was going about it was definitely not forgivable. Like he was taking orphans and training them ruthlessly to become assassins, and also taking countless lives by having his recruits touch the God Cube in hopes that they would be strong enough vessels to receive God's power. But of course many of them were not worthy, leading to their immediate death. And honestly, I also think it's pretty dumb that Empty Void would think that the combined power of his monster disciples, even after consuming his own power, would be strong enough to take on and defeat God. Like God's the one that gave you that power to begin with. What makes you think that that's all the power that he had? You know what I mean? But with the revelation of Empty Void's master plan, that's when we got yet another reset of the entire arc.
You can't keep getting away with it! He can't keep getting away with it!
We start almost all the way from the beginning again, when Saitama and Flash first meet Blast in this arc, but instead of meeting him inside the research facility, they meet him inside of Sitch's office. One thing I will say is that this final version of the arc has the best artwork of all three versions, and it's also the version that follows the original story the most closely. The version that's almost a one-for-one copy of the webcomic version, minus of course the involvement of Blast. We still of course see the fight between Sonic and Flashy Flash, and we also get the Heavenly Ninja Party interjecting. But again, this point is where the major changes really start to happen, and where I think they're changes for the worse. Because instead of Sonic and Flashy Flash taking down the Heavenly Ninja Party themselves, and kind of having their own shining moment where they display their own individual growth, Blast butts in much sooner than in previous versions, and defeats the Heavenly Ninja Party himself, which honestly I think is kind of lame. Like, let our boys have their moment. This is called the Ninja Village arc after all. It should heavily showcase ninjas, not be more opportunities for Blast to aura farm. But nonetheless, in this final version, Blast comes in and peace ups the Heavenly Ninja Party, but this time Empty Void does not show up. He actually does what he does in the original webcomic version. He goes to Sonic's hideout to wait for him in order to defeat him himself. But unfortunately for him, Saitama is also there waiting for Sonic, so he ends up defeating Empty Void off panel himself. We only see the end result of the fight, which is this iconic shot from the webcomic, where Saitama is just sitting there casually as Empty Void is imprinted into the ground, and the chapter ends with these like dimensional monsters showing up shooting energy blasts that are counteracted by Overgrown Rover that is also there for some reason. As of the recording of this video, this arc isn't completed yet, but at this point it seems like the story is taking a much different direction than the previous two versions. Sure, if this was the original version that came out, like the very first version of this arc, I would probably appreciate it much more than I do now, but seeing this as the third version, and also considering that Flashy Flash and Sonic have much less time to shine in this new version, I don't know, I for one am kind of over all this, to be honest. I'm just waiting for us to move on to the next thing.